You're about to take a deep dive into one of the biggest true crime cases in the universe, or at least on our part of the planet. From the Hidden Killers podcast and True Crime Today.
In the final days of Alex Murdaugh's trial, as the media circus reached its peak and the world waited for a verdict, one woman found herself cast out of the spotlight, dismissed just hours before deliberations began. Her name was Myra Crosby, juror number 785, and her sudden removal from the jury has since become the centerpiece of an intense legal battle. It's a story about power, manipulation, and what happens when the truth is hidden behind sealed records. But first, let's go back to the beginning, where a quiet woman, sitting in the courtroom for 6 weeks, was about to become the center of an unexpected storm. Myra Crosby had been a regular juror, one of the 12 sworn to decide the fate of Alex Murdaugh, a man from a powerful legal family now accused of murdering his wife Maggie and son Paul. Crosby had listened to weeks of testimony, seen the evidence, and like everyone else was gearing up to deliver a verdict. But just before deliberations began, she was dismissed from the jury. The reason? A Facebook post that never actually existed. It was a cold February morning in Walterboro, South Carolina. Court was about to enter its final stages. The tension in the room was palpable. 6 weeks of testimony had led to this moment, and everyone, jurors, attorneys, the judge, and the families, was preparing for the final showdown, deliberation. And then something unusual happened. Colleton County Clerk of Court Rebecca Hill stepped up and whispered something to Judge Clifton Newman. What followed was a series of hurried discussions, some of which took place behind closed doors, away from the prying eyes of the courtroom audience. Moments later, juror number 785, Myra Crosby, was dismissed from the jury. The reason given to the public was that Crosby's ex-husband, Tim Stone, had made a Facebook post stating that he and Crosby had been drinking together, and during that time, Crosby had allegedly expressed her views on whether Murdaugh was guilty or innocent. It was, Hill explained, a clear violation of the court's instructions. Jurors were not supposed to discuss the trial outside of deliberations, and that violation, Hill implied, made Crosby unfit to continue. But there was a problem. Tim Stone denied making the Facebook post. In fact, he went so far as to provide a sworn affidavit saying he hadn't posted anything about the trial and that he hadn't seen or spoken to Crosby in over 10 years. The alleged post didn't exist. So, if there was no post, why did Rebecca Hill say there was? Where did this story come from? Rebecca Hill's reputation as clerk of court had been, until that point, solid. She was seen as efficient, professional, someone who understood the mechanics of the judicial process. But in the days and weeks following Crosby's dismissal, whispers began circulating. Some people suggested that Hill had made up the story about the Facebook post. Others speculated that she had misunderstood or misinterpreted something she saw online. Hill's official explanation was that she had visited Tim Stone's house, where he admitted to her that he had made the post. Yet Stone denied this encounter ever took place, and the supposed Facebook post was never found, not by investigators, not by the defense, and not by the public. It didn't exist. If Hill had lied or fabricated the story, the implications were enormous. A single false claim had removed a juror just before deliberations began, one who reportedly might have been on the fence about Murdaugh's guilt. And if that juror had remained, it could have changed the course of the entire trial. As the days passed, more details began to emerge about Hill's behavior during the trial. Murdaugh's legal team filed a bombshell motion in September 2023, accusing Hill of jury tampering. They alleged that she had pressured jurors to convict Murdaugh, telling them not to be misled by the defense and to focus on the prosecution's case. Hill, it seemed, wasn't content to simply oversee the administrative aspects of the trial. She wanted a hand in its outcome. The defense claimed that Hill's motivations were more personal than professional. Shortly after the trial, Hill had published a book about the case, a book that was said to detail behind-the-scenes moments from the trial. The defense suggested that Hill had pushed for a conviction to ensure a more sensational story for her book. But at the center of all these allegations was the story of Myra Crosby's dismissal. Why had Hill targeted her? Why had she concocted a story about a Facebook post? The answers to these questions remain elusive, partly because the records surrounding Crosby's dismissal have been sealed by the South Carolina Supreme Court. For months, Myra Crosby remained silent, her story largely untold, her dismissal just a footnote in the larger Murdaugh saga. But in November 2023, Crosby filed a petition to unseal the records of her removal. She wanted the truth to come out. She wanted the world to know what had happened behind closed doors. Crosby's attorney, Joe McCulloch, argued that the public had a right to see what had taken place backstage during the trial. He pointed out that the only juror affected by the sealed documents was Crosby herself, and she was now asking for them to be made public. Yet, the state of South Carolina, specifically the Office of Attorney General Alan Wilson, opposed Crosby's request. The AG's office argued that the sealed records were part of an ongoing legal matter and should remain confidential. Murdaugh's defense team, however, saw it differently. They pointed out that if there was nothing improper about Crosby's dismissal, there should be no reason to keep the records sealed. As we dive deeper into this story, we're left to wonder, what exactly did Rebecca Hill show or say to Judge Newman? Did she present fabricated evidence? Did she misunderstand a post from someone else's Facebook account? Or was this a calculated move to ensure a conviction? One possibility is that Hill was genuinely mistaken. Perhaps she saw a post from someone else with a similar name or misinterpreted something she read online. But if that were the case, wouldn't the post have surfaced by now? Investigators and journalists scoured social media for any trace of this alleged post, and they came up empty-handed. Another, more troubling possibility is that Hill deliberately fabricated the Facebook post to remove Crosby from the jury. If that's the case, it raises serious questions about the integrity of the trial. Was Crosby removed because she was perceived as a threat to a guilty verdict? Was Hill so invested in seeing Murdaugh convicted that she took matters into her own hands? Murdaugh's legal team certainly thinks so. In their appeal, they argue that Hill's actions were a form of jury tampering, an effort to influence the outcome of the trial by removing a potentially undecided juror. Let's pause for a moment and imagine what could have happened if Myra Crosby had remained on the jury. According to some reports, Crosby was undecided about Murdaugh's guilt. She wasn't swayed by the prosecution's case, and her removal just hours before deliberations began raises the possibility that she could have hung the jury. Had Crosby stayed, it's possible the trial could have ended in a mistrial. The jury might have been deadlocked, unable to reach a unanimous verdict. This would have been a major blow to the prosecution and might have given Murdaugh's defense team the upper hand in future proceedings. But that's not what happened. Instead, Crosby was removed, and the jury ultimately convicted Murdaugh of 2 counts of murder. And while some might argue that Murdaugh's conviction was inevitable, others believe that Crosby's removal tipped the scales in favor of the prosecution. As of now, the records surrounding Myra Crosby's dismissal remain sealed, and the truth about what really happened during those final days of the trial is still obscured. But Crosby's story is far from over. Her petition to unseal the records is still pending, and if those documents are ever made public, they could shed new light on the allegations against Rebecca Hill and the entire Murdaugh trial. In interviews, Crosby has expressed her frustration with the system, saying that she feels she was unfairly targeted and removed from the jury. She insists that she followed the court's instructions and never discussed the trial with anyone, let alone her ex-husband. For Rebecca Hill, the future is less certain. If the allegations against her are proven true, it could result in a major scandal, not only for her, but for the entire South Carolina judicial system. The idea that a court official could influence a trial in such a brazen manner would be a blow to public trust in the legal system. In the world of true crime, stories like this are often more complicated than they first appear. Myra Crosby's dismissal from the Murdaugh jury might seem like a small footnote in the larger narrative of the case, but in reality, it's a story about power, manipulation, and what happens when the truth is obscured. As the South Carolina Supreme Court deliberates on whether to unseal the records, one thing is clear. This story isn't just about Alex Murdaugh anymore. It's about the integrity of the legal system and the lengths people will go to secure a conviction. Whether Becky Hill acted out of confusion or deliberate intent remains to be seen, but the implications of her actions will be felt for years to come. And as for Myra Crosby, she may have been dismissed from the jury, but her story is far from over.
In a world where the darkest secrets lie just beneath the surface,
They said it was an accident, but the evidence says otherwise.
where hidden killers roam unnoticed in the shadows.
I think you would definitely be looking at a blend of toxic, very bad narcissistic personality traits, and they will be vengeful and possibly resort to violence.
Join Tony Bruschi as he uncovers the truth behind the most chilling cases.
They said it was an accident, but the evidence clearly says otherwise.
Each episode, we dig deep into the minds of those who commit the unthinkable.
To your point on narcissism, he thinks in his own mind how witty he is.
Yeah.
But he lost that jury. I was done with him in 2 minutes.
From unsolved mysteries to infamous crimes.
Geez, you've just talked about how you've taught yourself how to do everything under the sun. I bet you did a YouTube video, how to best kill somebody with a knife.
Hidden Killers with Tony Bruschi takes you where few dare to go.
How does someone with such a dark secret go unnoticed for so long?
With multiple new episodes every single day.
We're not just telling stories, we're seeking justice.
Listen now on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. Just search for Hidden Killers with Tony Bruschi.